members' attendance and apologies. John, please.
Hello, members. To all members of Derry City and Strabane District Council, you're hereby summoned to attend this special meeting of the Council, which will be a hybrid meeting conducted remotely via WebEx and physically here in the Council chamber, Wednesday, 14th of February at 2 o'clock. Alderman Cook.
Online, John.
Alderman Guy. Alderman Hussey.
Online, aye.
Alderman Carrigan.
Here, John.
Alderman McMorris.
Online, John.
Alderman Middleton.
Here, John. Online.
Alderman Montgomery.
Apologies, John.
Online.
Alderman Wilkinson.
Online, John.
Councillor Jason Barr. Councillor Lillian Barr.
Here, John.
Councillor Raymond Barr.
Online, John.
Councillor Boggs.
He's just popped out.
Okay. Councillor Boyle.
Here.
Councillor Cusick.
Here, John.
Councillor Deeney.
And Shaw.
Councillor Devine.
Shaw.
Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Duffy.
Shaw.
Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Fleming.
And Sean.
Councillor Gallagher.
And Shaw.
Councillor Harkin.
Here.
Councillor Hart.
And Shaw.
Councillor Heaney.
And Shaw.
Councillor Hutton.
And Shaw.
Councillor Jackson.
Shaw.
Councillor Leonard.
And Shaw.
Councillor Logue.
And Shaw.
Councillor McDade.
Here.
Councillor McGinley.
Shaw.
Councillor McGowan.
And Shaw.
Councillor McHugh. Councillor Mooney.
Here.
Councillor Murphy.
Shaw.
Councillor Norr.
Here.
Councillor O'Farrell.
Shaw, John.
Councillor Riley.
Here, John.
Councillor Tierney.
Here, John.
Councillor Neelis.
Elena.
Thank you, members. I'm just checking on Councillor Jason Barr
Here, John.
and Councillor Boggs. Thank you, members.
I'm just going to read out the broadcasting statement. I would like to remind everyone present at this meeting and the Guildhall in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes, and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded only to have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the Council's privacy notice may be found on the Council's website at www.derrystrabane.com. Declarations of members' interests? No. Just a bit of chairperson's business before we begin. We all would have received an email this morning, and maybe some of you didn't get a chance, but apparently there was people online and they couldn't hear votes, etc. So it's just to remind everybody, please have your mic on if you're speaking at all, even on a vote. And also, I just want to welcome the news regarding the airport. It's very welcome news, and so hopefully we'll get more good news like that too as well. So I'm just going to pass over to Alfie now. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members, the purpose of the report before you today is to agree our district rates proposals for the 24-25 financial year. And this obviously follows a number of weeks of detailed engagement between officers and members and reviews of budgets. So there's obviously a detailed report in front of you. I'm just going to pick out what I see as the three main elements of that report, members. So the proposed rates increase at today's meeting is 6.5%. It's made up of three component parts. So the first part is 3.17%, which is increased to cover statutory pressures and inflation. And essentially, members, that means that we'll be able to continue to deliver a full suite of critical frontline services to all our ratepayers. We have protected all jobs, all our statutory and core services, as well as all the funding that we provide to the community organisations and arts and culture groups who rely very much on our funding to deliver services and projects across the district. That component also includes new investment, members, which will see service development with provisions set aside to allow the rollout of brown bins in remaining rural areas. The second element, members, 1.83%, is to offset the central government grant cuts, mainly to rate support grant. And the third element, and the most exciting element, members, is that this year's rates increase includes 1.5%, which is direct investment into our ambitious capital programme. That builds on the 420 million of capital investment, which has either already been delivered by the new council or is in progress of being delivered, and that includes our City Deal Inclusive Future Fund investment. So the new investment as part of this year's rates will now enable us to work towards achieving a further 210 million of capital development, and that includes our strategic leisure projects and further community investment across the district. Members, subsequent to today's discussion, for the reasons set out in section 3.12 of the report, and obviously the very detailed process that we've been through, and our Chief Financial Officer, our Chief Executive, will be able to confirm that the rates estimates presented before you today are robust and that our reserves will be adequate for the funding of our services for the year ahead. So, members, just concluding with the impact of today's proposals on ratepayers across the district. So, obviously excluding the regional rate, which isn't known at this point, that's set out in section 4.3 of the report. So today's increase would mean a £35.92 per annum increase, or a 69 pence per week for an average domestic ratepayer in the district. In relation to non-domestic ratepayers, that impact will be very, very different depending on the property values, which obviously vary significantly between ratepayers. But the report does point out that many of our non-domestic ratepayers avail of very significant reliefs in relation to rates, with 14% of non-domestic ratepayers fully exempt, 65% availing of small business rate relief, and a further 7% availing of derating grant relief. So essentially, members, 14% of our businesses are subject to full rates, and an element of those will obviously relate to public sector ratepayers. So, members, the recommendation in the report today is that Council strikes a district rates increase of 6.5% for the 24-25 financial year, the key components of which are detailed in the report, including a non-domestic rate of 37.7468 pence in the pound and a domestic rate of 0.6070 pence in the pound, and also, members, that you authorise the expenditure as detailed within the detailed rates booklets previously provided. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Alfie. Christopher, come on.
Good Mayor, and thanks Alfie and the entire team for all the work that's been put on the rates process over the last number of years. We know it's been particularly difficult, and it's really challenging times. I think it's been outlined that there's been a lot of work by officers and all members, numerous meetings where we've been, and we've had private meetings with officers as well. They look and go through line by line Council's expenditure and look at ways that we can minimise any rise. And I believe, from our perspective, is that the position we've arrived at now is the lowest that we could possibly get, whilst avoiding job losses, with avoiding cuts to services, and ensuring that council workers receive, or there's a budget set aside to ensure that there's a fair pay rise. And I think that's clearly outlined in your report. There's 3 sections. There's the statutory pressures, which total 3.17%, which we've I think we would all agree that a large section of that is workers' pay, and I don't think there's anybody in here. I haven't heard any member argue that workers don't deserve a fair pay raise, and there's nobody arguing that there should be any compulsory redundancies as part of on the back of a RITS process. So the next element is the central government cuts of 1.83%. Now, those cuts are a subject of quite a lot of debate. I think we as a council will be challenging those cuts at every possible avenue, and will be lobbying for additional investment under the city and district. But we have to budget. We can't be in a position where there's if a budget is agreed by an executive, and there does some of these cuts are not reversed, then we don't want to be in a position where the repairs are unduly impacted. And so it is prudent for us to budget for the cuts that are being predicted, because we know that we have been faced with austerity budgets from a British minister, and that now it is very welcome news that we have local ministers now in place that hopefully will again provide support to councils, because I think it was only a few years ago we were faced with a global pandemic where councils were decimated, and councils were facing double digits rates increases to ensure that we have adequate budgets. At that time, local ministers stepped up, provided the support to councils to ensure, and in turn provided that support to repairs. So I'm hoping now that we have the space, that we have local ministers again in place, they will acknowledge the significant pressures the council are under. But we have to remind ourselves that ministers are only in place a little over a week. So let's allow that time for ministers to work out budgets, and hopefully that the councils right across the north will receive the support that they desperately need. But I think we can't assume that, because we understand that local ministers are still subject to the block grant. They're still, budgets are completely dependent on a budget flowing from Westminster. So, and we know that there's huge pressures right across our public sector, not least the massive demand for public sector pay, which every single member in this chamber has completely endorsed. So we understand that the pressures that are there at an executive level, and we know that we're only going to overcome those pressures with an adequate budget coming from the British Treasury. So the last element of this, and it's a key element for us, is the strategic leisure. We're in a position right now where we've got an opportunity to advance key projects such as Riversdale and Templemore. We've talked about it for long enough. I think every single person in this chamber wants this to happen. Previous mandates, previous terms of council, there was always an aspiration to deliver Templemore and to deliver strategic leisure in the Canal Basin or the Riversdale. We have an opportunity in front of us now to make it happen. And from our perspective, this is a key priority. We want, in this council mandate, to deliver on Templemore and to deliver in Riversdale. And this is the first step in that delivery. So on that basis, I'm content to propose that we accept the recommendations that are in front of us and deliver key projects for the people of the city and district.
Thank you, Christopher. And can I have a seconder? A proposal? Thank you, Sandra. Councillor Harkin? No. Councillor Harkin, Tierney, and then yourself.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to Alfie and all the officer team that have done such diligent work preparing the proposal and, making clear the budgetary challenges that Council faces. And also as well, I want to thank all our hardworking staff who day in, day out deliver services right across the district that we fully depend upon. And we want to make sure that those services are sustained and expanded and developed. And we all know for the last couple of years, council finances have been under tremendous pressure. And we've been told that we can't get any help from central government because there's been no government and there's been no ministers in place. And then we in turn have passed on those pressures to our ratepayers. Last year, as people know, we put through an 8% rates hike, and we also put through millions in cuts to council services. That was very, very painful. Now, now we're in a situation where our government is back and we have ministers in place. And I believe it's no longer the case that central government isn't able to intervene in here. Not only do we have a government in place, but we were told that there would be £3.3 billion available to help with budgets right across the north. So we have three things that central government can intervene with. The rate support grant, and as we know, the rate support grant has been cut from almost £20 million to now less than £5 million. And if we were to receive the 21% that we're supposed to receive, that would be millions of pounds that we would be able to invest into the district. We have also called on central government to give ministerial agreement and sign off to the City of Derry Airport business case, which costs the council, as we know, £3.5 million a year. And there's also been painful cuts to Peace Plus, to Good Relations, and a swath of other council-funded services. We've written letters to all the new ministers that are in place, and as far as I can tell, we've been completely ignored. There hasn't been a single meeting with council officers or an invitation for a meeting to discuss what can be done right now. I find that the fact that we've been ignored alarming, given that the First Minister in her first speech as First Minister said and pledged that Derry and the North West would be prioritised for investment. And that can't be investment down the line. That has to be right now. And this was an opportunity to intervene and help and assist our council, because we know that council, as it's been repeated already and said, has been put under enormous financial pressure over the last number of years and is again this year. So we are proposing now another 6.5% rates hike to our ratepayers across the city and the district, which is well above inflation, which I think many people will find alarming, given that they were told that the rate will come down when inflation comes down, and we're going to do everything that we can to make that happen. We are also being told that there's a prediction of a 15% regional rate hike. And I think the combination of a 6.5% rate hike that we would potentially put through, and then a 15% rate hike, I think many of our ratepayers across the district will find astonishing, because the cost of living pressures that have been hitting the vast majority of people and organisations have not receded. Many people are still struggling. Many people have not had pay raises. Many organisations are closing because they haven't been able to survive. Now, we can say ministers haven't had a chance yet to look at to deal with budgets. There's still a lot up in the air. But the infrastructure minister in the last week was able to find £1 million to begin the process of fixing our roads. And that's because that was an emergency. And that's because there was a public demand. So why couldn't any of the ministers meet with us to talk about what they could do right now to help with things like the rate support grant, to help move forward the signing off of the City of Derry business case, or to reverse some of the painful cuts that have been imposed on the council? So that could have happened. And it's on that basis that I and People Before Profit can't support a 6.5% rates increase. And we would encourage all other members to reject that as well. It's not acceptable for Stormont ministers to ignore Derry and Strabane District Council, to ignore the fact that our ratepayers have carried the burden of cuts from central government over the last 2 years. And we as a council have to do everything we can to push back against that, and not accept that they couldn't have meetings with us, and not accept the idea that they didn't have time to find money as they did for infrastructure and for the roads, and that could have been done. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Mayor. The SDLP group on this council are disappointed that a rates increase has been suggested and will be likely voted through this council, despite over £3.3 billion being committed to the North by the British government. We, and I have said this before, were encouraged by the First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, referencing tackling regional imbalance across Derry and the North West in her speech when she became First Minister. And the SDLP also agree with the First Minister when she said in a BBC interview during the week that we cannot place more burden on struggling families coping with the cost of living crisis with additional household bills. Now, over recent days, we have seen the fallout between the executive parties and the British government on how the executive plan to pay back the £3.3 billion. According to the British government, the executive must come up with revenue-raising ideas. This is likely to add another burden onto already struggling families. Those who voted or who will vote for this increase today will likely try to spin it, as we've already heard from Councillor Jackson, that those of us opposed to it offered no alternative, and the only alternative was to cut services and put council workers' jobs at risk. This is simply not true. We're opposing this rates increase of 6.5% because we believe that ratepayers across this council district have carried the can for far too long. We reluctantly supported a rates increase last year because we had no avenue for further support from council with the lack of an executive at Stormont. Now, Mayor, on behalf of the SDLP, I want to thank council officers for their continued engagement with us as a group on this issue. And I want to make it clear that our decision to oppose this recommendation today is not a reflection on the work that they have carried out during this process. The reality is that there's a hole in this council's finances. Council officers are tasked with finding ways of filling that gap. May that be suggesting ways to reduce outgoings or to increase the income. However, let's look at the facts and figures, Mayor. 1% of an increase is equal to £710,000. Multiply that by 6.5% and it equals roughly £4.6 million of a gap in this council's finances. Now, the SDLP understands that this gap needs filled, but it should not be filled by placing more burden on struggling families coping with the cost of living crisis and additional household bills. Mayor, they're not my words. They're the words of the First Minister, Michelle O'Neill. Now, every party and independent member of this council agree that this council's corporate position is that the rate support grant should rise each year in line with inflation. If that was the case, the rate support grant had have risen in line with inflation since 2008, our share this year would be £6.25 million, not the 900,000 that we are expecting to receive. Now, only a few days ago, my colleague Mark Hitch-Durkin, MLA, asked the Minister for Communities, Gordon Lyons, what plans his department had to provide financial assistance to local councils and to increase the rate support grant for less well-off council areas. The Minister responded by saying, I will consider further funding for councils, including the rate support grant, in the context of my department's overall budget priorities. If any further funding becomes available for the current financial year. My department's budget for 24-25 has not been agreed yet by the executive, and I am therefore unable to confirm any funding at this stage for councils for the next financial year. That reads to me, Mayor, that the Minister in charge hasn't even considered what support his department will give to councils. And in our view, that's not good enough.
and neither is expecting ratepayers across Derry and Strabane to foot the bill while the executive gets its act together. It is due to this obvious lack of financial support and the ongoing imbalance, regional imbalance across Derry and Strabane and the wider Northwest, which to date has not been addressed by the executive, despite ministers suggesting that they were ready to work and support families on day one. These are the reasons that the SDLP will not support this rates increase this year, and we encourage others to do the same. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Gallagher and then Councillor Barr.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, before I give my spiel that everybody else has, Mayor, could I have just have a query from Alfie? Can I put a query in? Just do you see on when we talk about the cost of the airport, and it's almost 3.5 million, and then we have that is no proposed rates impact. How's that reconciled?
So we still have 3.5 million in our budget for next year for the airport, but I think what that means is there'll be no increase to that. So therefore, of the increase, there's obviously none of it relating to the airport.
Thank you for that. So I should say no increase in our rates, because I'm saying is if we have the 3.5 million in our bank account, and we're able to use that to offset the rise, then we wouldn't have a 6.5 rise. That's probably the reality of that. So this airport's going to cost us a lot more in the future. But and again, the 1 million that was announced today won't go anywhere near running this airport. The 1 million hasn't got anything to do with running the airport. 3.5 million that the ratepayers paying is running the airport, and no matter what spending the parties in here put on that, that's the reality for the ratepayer. And I see some of the parties in here that are trying to dress up this rise as we're going to get our Riversdale and we're going to get our Templemore. I think that people of Strabane has been hearing that since 2015, and year on year on year, there has been a rates increase, and there's yet to be a sod dug on Riversdale. Not that I can't say there is some work going on in the background, but as far as costs are concerned, the repairs are continuing to pay, and I think this is just window dressing, bringing in Riversdale as some sort of way of telling the public accept this rate rise and the day we find ourselves in. I'll not be supporting this rates. I'll not be supporting it for a number of reasons. There's some good stuff in there, 100%, and thanks to the officers for bringing that to us. But we, as a council, need to stand up. We need to stand up to central government. We've been hearing for 2 years, Stormont's down and Stormont's up, we're going to get sorted, we're going to get sorted. Wake up and smell the coffee. It's not happening. We're still going to get a rates rise. And what we're getting on top of that is duplication of services that this council is paying for, that our ratepayers are paying for, that central government should be paying for, and they come down today here, like, and announce £1 million that's got nothing to do with them from a PSO that's coming from a treasury in London. Bluff, smoke and mirrors, and trying to fool the public. Not be fooled by it. I would encourage people not to be fooled by it. We are sitting here. We're not challenging the duplication. We're not challenging double taxation, triple taxation. When you buy a ticket for the airport, that's 3 times we've paid for it. We'll pay for it through our taxes, we'll pay for it through our rates, and we'll pay for it by buying a ticket. Causeway Coast and Glens, paying nothing. Donegal, paying nothing. All the ratepayers, Strabane and Derry, are paying for it, and we shouldn't. Thank you.
Councillor Barr.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just say, I agree 100% with everything that Councillor Gallagher has just said, especially in relation to the airport. I know I accept, rates are a basic statutory and necessary obligation. I will be voting against any increase as a matter of principle and protest. I still firmly believe that the services and facilities afforded to Strabane and the other rural areas in the council district are disproportionate and inferior to those in the city. That's it. Thank you.
Sandra?
Good morning, Mayor, and thank you to the council officers for the work that they have done in terms of bringing us to this stage. I would say that I am disappointed today, and I had hoped for some grown-up politics, but unfortunately what we're seeing is more politicking. I just want to inject a wee bit of realism. We are here to protect services, we're here to protect workers, and we are looking to build for the future for our city and district. And I believe that that's what the rates have done. There's been a lot of commentary from other parties and independents. Personally, I wonder if they were asleep, particularly Councillor Harkin, who seemed to miss that there was 2 ministers in Derry today, meeting with various bodies, meeting with the airport, and meeting with council officers and other councillors in terms of some of the challenges that we face. I am delighted to see so many people who have quoted the First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, and her intent to the Northwest and to Derry, because it shows that they are listening and it shows that they have heard her intent. And I think the 2 ministers in our city today talking about the economic development of the city and district shows that intent, shows that drive to ensure that this city and district, we address regional imbalance and we grow as a city and district. We want to improve what we have to offer, and that's what we're going to do. I think that this rates process today, it's a fair number that we have stopped on, but we will continue to lobby, because one of the major gaps here is the rate support grant. And I think we need to continue to be lobbying with ministers. We need to continue to use our voice to ensure that the city and district and the Northwest as a whole is heard. And I think we have done that. And I think in terms of government at the minute, they have heard our calls and they are listening and they are going to act. And I believe that the fact that we had 2 ministers in the city today, the economy minister and the infrastructure minister, shows that. I would also say to Councillor Harkin, in terms of the 1 million for potholes, that's a one-off cost. I don't believe that you actually understand the business case for the airport, or you wouldn't have compared it. It's apples and oranges. Thank you.
Thank you.
One further question. If no rate is struck here today, what's the implications for this council?
Okay, I'll let maybe Alfie John answer that before I go to Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, so Mayor, through you, Council's under a statutory obligation to set a rate for the district, and it has to do so by tomorrow. Members, there has been one occasion that I am aware of where a council did not strike a rate, which was back in 1984, I think. And in that situation, the council was taken to court by one of the ratepayers in relation to the matter, and the court ruled that even though the Department for Infrastructure equivalent, Department for Community, equivalent at the time, had the power to step in and set a rate, that was not a satisfactory remedy, and the court compelled the council to come back and strike a rate at that time within a short period of time. In addition, the council was then met with the costs of the failure to strike the rate, the court proceedings and everything that was associated with the matter. And I think that cost was then passed on to individual elected members at that time. Now, the rules in relation to that have changed somewhat, so it's not directly analogous, but the bottom line is council's under statutory obligation to set a rate today. There is no alternative remedy which is available, and if the council fails to strike a rate, then it will be taken to court and it will be compelled to set a rate.
Thank you, Philip. Councillor Donnelly.
Well, good, Chair. It's probably no surprise the councillors or aldermen in here that will be supporting the rates. I never have, Chair. And that's simply as a result of this council's connection and, in my opinion, squandering hundreds of thousands of pounds in a vain attempt to promote British policing. However, said that, Chair, there is a number of other issues that I feel that need to be brought up here today. And I believe it's down to bad management by this council. And one case in particular is the Ballinagard housing development in Culmore, where, you know, there was a separation. Well, effectively, this council gave the go-ahead to initiate a dodgy land deal with people who have control of council land that it doesn't belong to them. And I think that's an absolute disgrace. It's a disgrace that repairs money will be lost in such a way. And following on in that, there is the issue of the scheme, the open space scheme in that housing development, where this council was given a document that said that there was an agreement that they would be separated, that council would take control of that scheme. And that decision has cost this council over £500,000. And I have asked on numerous occasions for a copy of that agreement, and I have never, ever got it. I've been told, you know, come down and go through the office and look for it. I don't believe it exists. And if it doesn't exist, then we should be told, because we made that decision back then based on an agreement. And I think, and a lot of our people think, that that could potentially be the tip of the iceberg. And there is emerging cases, particularly in the planning, that things just aren't right. I want to just go back to the whole issue of Stormont. And I can only describe it as a Liz Taylor marriage type situation, where it's often celebrated, but it doesn't last long. We've had 2 years on here, Chair, of people saying, get Stormont up and running. And it was up and running, or it is up and running. And unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever way you want to look at it, it hasn't lasted as long as one of Liz Taylor's marriages. But the thing is, last week we decided in this council to postpone this meeting in order to go to the saviours of Stormont and ask them could they fix the rate support grant. And I think it was quite telling that Sinn Féin didn't want to do that. And that was an indication to me and many other people that there's no point in going and asking them, because they're not going to do it. And it looks as if that's what's happened here. That will not be a surprise to many, many people out there. We asked for contact ministers. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it hasn't been discussed at this meeting, and I don't think we've had an answer from them ministers. So that was a live proposal. And I know there's a proposal on the floor from Councillor Jackson, but the reality is we put this off until these people would come back and give us an answer, even if it was to piss off. That hasn't happened, Chair. So I would like a legal opinion. You know, is that proposal still active? Because we haven't had contact. These people who have been lauded in this chamber for the last 2 years of get it up and running, they're going to be our saviours, haven't even responded to the corporate position of this council. They asked for an explanation. Could I have a legal opinion on that, please?
Councillor Donnelly, just to clarify the proposal that you need clarified on, is it still relevant? Can you just...
Yeah, Chair, it was in the last meeting that we had here where it was intended to strike a rate. It was voted in here to postpone that in order so that we could contact Stormont ministers regarding the rate support grant. And I could be wrong, but it's my understanding that they haven't come back with a position. So what I'm asking for is that, where does that leave us? We postponed a striking of the rates until they at least give us an explanation or an answer to the restoration of the rate support grant.
Okay, John or Bob?
Sorry, through you, Mayor. Stand to be corrected, but my understanding is that the postponement or the instruction from the council was to write letters to the ministers, specifically in relation to both the airport and the rate support grant, and also to contact NILGA for a collective position on it. That, Councillor Donnelly, has been done. I think those letters were included in the pack that came to the special full council meeting last Friday.
So, Chair, the eternal optimist may say there may be something en route via email or something like that, or is that, can anybody who's connected to ministers categorically rule that out, that you're on your own?
I know there has been a Holden response, know that they have received the correspondence, but if,
I think we have received a number of holding responses, but also, as has been pointed out this morning, two ministers met with the airport board this morning with regard to the airport issues. One of which was a fairly positive and a very positive announcement in respect of the continuation of funding for the London PSO. And the other discussion was in and around the progression of the business case for the medium to long-term sustainability of the airport. I don't think we've received a response in relation to the rate support grant from the Communities Minister. Would that be correct? Acknowledgement, and certainly with regard to the letter to NILGA, NILGA have acted as requested and have drafted and sent correspondence on behalf of this and other councils as well in relation to the rate support grant. That's my understanding of it since last Friday.
Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I just wanted to respond to Councillor Duffy's comments. I think they were a wee bit unfair. I am very awake, unfortunately, and I was very aware that the ministers were here today. And I actually was hoping that the ministers would be here today to announce that they would be committed to signing off on the business case to fund City of Derry Airport and to take that £3.5 million burden off the back of our ratepayers. But based on what John has just said, there was no announcement to that effect. So we haven't had really a direct response to any of our requests, as far as I can tell, as a council. I think we've just been ignored. And I think that that's unacceptable. We had 2 years where where our ratepayers had an extremely difficult time dealing with cost of living pressures that put a lot of families through the floor, where people lost their houses. And then we piled on top of that with rates increases, telling people there's no government, there's nobody coming over the hill, there's nothing we can do. And when government comes back, we'll be in a better situation so we can start lobbying. And I think most people expect us right now to be saying that things are going to shift. So the first thing that's happening is that instead of us alleviating the burden on people, we're actually piling it on them again. And I think that the best way for us to protect council finances, jobs, services, and everything that this council does, and our ratepayers, is to be demanding that central government intervene and provide financial assistance to our government. It's something that has been, raised a lot over the last 2 years, and we're now in a situation where there's an opportunity to do it. And the point about the infrastructure minister finding £1 million, it's to say that, look, we are being told that budgets aren't set, there's no money available yet, but the minister, because he thought it was urgent, was able to find £1 million. £1 million for this council would actually be welcomed. £2 million would be welcomed. £3 million would be even more welcomed. As Councillor Tierney said, if the rate support grant was properly restored, we would be sitting on nearly £7 million potentially. So I think that, the people of this district expect us to be doing everything we can. And I think that the worry I have is that despite getting this £3.3 billion for Stormont, that people now are still without pay raises. Workers are still talking about going on strike, and people are still being hit with above inflation rate increases and possibly a 15% regional rate increase. And then there's concerns and worries about other new forms of taxation as well. So instead of Stormont actually lifting the burden off people's back, I think that there's a concern that it will actually, that the people who have struggled over the last couple of years are going to be asked to take on even more of the burden. And that's starting with our council rate. So I don't actually believe we've had genuine responses. I don't think that the ministers being here was to address the questions that we were asking around the business case for City of Derry Airport. or anything else. So we've just been ignored despite the comments of the First Minister.
Councillor McGowan.
Thank you for letting me on, Mayor. I wasn't going to say anything, but this is my last meeting today. So, and like the last 3 Februaries, it feels a bit like Groundhog Day. I think our party leader has framed this very, very well. I'm just looking at this from a position of realism. There's 3 elements to this rates that are in front of all members. The first element we know is 3.17, and that's lower than inflation, and that's on all of us, all 40 members. Most of that is made up of workers' pay, and the fact it's 3.17 is down to the actions we took last year, and also John and his team keeping that below inflation. And you know, I heard Councillor Tierney say we reluctantly support it. No one walks into this chamber in February and wants to increase rates by any amount. But we all know that inflation, an inflationary increase, is what you can hope for at best. And in life, we all know that. And for people, that, you know, the zero rates argument I heard in the first year, it's just not possible. That means you're making whatever inflation is, you're making that percentage of savings each year. So, I mean, we have a job of work to do. It has to be done today legally, or the council doesn't function. And there, you know, no one wants to strike any increase. No one wants to do that. But in reality, unless inflation is zero, that's not possible. And then the second element of the rates, the 1.5. Everyone has heard about austerity over the last 18 years. You could say 15, 18 years of the end of Labour and the beginning of the Tories. And we all know what happens whenever you cut back. You know, you don't benefit from growth. So that 1.5%, again, I've been at meetings. We've all been at meetings throughout the year. That is the ambition of this city, to grow and to provide better services for the people out there in that district. So when I hear people saying we don't want to strike a rate, I mean, I just want to inject a bit of realism. What element are they against? Because us investing that 1.5 means better leisure services across this district. It works out about 15 pence a week per family or per ratepayer. And then last but not least, the 1.83. And I know that seems to have raised quite a few eyebrows today, and I'm not going to defend any minister in position that's only new in position, but you know, that seems to be what everyone here seems to be. The rate support grant seems to be the main thrust. And I know I don't think anyone in the chamber today wants to strike this rate at that, but every single one of them is going to work, and we're going to watch to see how that legal case plays out. Of course, as a party, we want the rate support grant brought back. But if a minister is written to and doesn't reply, there's nothing we can do. But by 5 o'clock today, we need to strike a rate. And there's no escaping that fact. So, you know, I just wanted to say that this has been my third rates, the same sort of stuff. People go along month on, month out to meetings. They don't say anything, and then they suddenly arrive here as if this is such a big surprise. The majority of that rate's at 6.5. You know, when you look at the 3.17, most of that's workers' pay. I've said that already. Over 70% of what we spend is workers' pay. That's on all of us. So we can blame Stormont all day long, but we have to decide something by 5 o'clock today. And none of us wants to strike a rate that's higher than what we think people can afford. But I'm struggling to find what would people take out. What's the plan B? Because we don't want to be dragged into court with a court case or not strike a rate. And if that's what people want to do, fine, but we've got to show leadership here. Thank you.
Councillor Boggs.
Mayor, and I will be brief. And it is in addition to what Councillor McGowan has just said. Nobody gets elected to any council. Nobody stands for election to raise rates, to vote for a rates increase. But what we do stand for election for, and I know what I pledged and what councillors at this side of the chamber pledged, was to stand up for public services, was to ensure that we have first-class public services right across our council. And up until now, there isn't one suggestion from anybody within this chamber about how we get less than 6.5%. And from what I can see, 6.5%, as has already been said, is the lowest rate that we can strike today to ensure that we don't have job losses, that we don't cut council services, that we ensure we do award a fair pay to workers, and that we progress strategic leisure. And there's a raft of other things within the rates papers in front of us. It was only before Christmas people sat on here and praised the work that's been done on Sunnydale in particular, and I think it was one member who branded it as transformational for Strabane. Those Sunnydale projects, in my opinion, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, particularly for Strabane Town, are built on the foundation stone of us progressing Riversdale as a strategic leisure project. So not only would, if we took the 1.5 off today, would we say cheerio to Riversdale for a while, and people talk about it as smoke and mirrors. It's smoke and mirrors to try and say that you want things, but you're not willing to pay for them. You would also be waving goodbye to the prospects of the £100 million plus that's coming into Strabane. So I fail to recognise how people can say we want X, Y, and Z, but we are not willing to pay for it. No one wants to raise the rate, but if we want things and we want first-class public services, then we need to pay for them. And that I don't think it's lost on the general public that you can't have things if you don't pay for them. You can't put an extension onto your house if you don't have the money in the bank. You can't do up your living room unless you have money in the bank, and that is a very simple analogy in comparison to what we want to do as a council. So I look again at other examples. There are things in there about the increased rollout of brown bins to rural areas, something that members talked about just before Christmas. But now when it's in the rates and you're being asked to pay for it, we don't want to do that. But we also don't want to make any suggestion as to how we would get the rate below 6.5. There is a proposal on the floor, but there is still not a vote taken that we strike it or that we don't. So there is still time for people to make proposals as to how we get it below 6.5. But people are abdicating the responsibility, as happens, or what seems to happen in this chamber, every time we come round to February and we have to strike a rate. It is that we stand back, we say no, zero rate increase this year. That doesn't work, and I don't think, Mayor, that it is lost on the general public that we have to pay for things. So while I wasn't elected to come in here and raise rates voluntarily and for fun, I am willing to vote for the proposal that Councillor Jackson has made because it is realistic. And I don't think it will be lost on the general public out there that if we want to do the things that we are setting out to do, all very ambitious, all will be very nice whenever delivered, we need to ensure that we can forward plan and cost ourselves so that we can afford those things in the future. But it baffles me how people can sit in this chamber and it will be revisited during the year when people are hailing council officers for delivering things that we have asked for, but yet didn't want to commit to paying for them whenever it came round to the rate. So still time for people to make proposals to reduce the rate further. But as far as I can see, Mayor, and this is my first year, we are ensuring that we're not losing jobs. We are ensuring that we are not forcing workers, council workers, who also need an income, a fair income. We're ensuring they're not forced out onto picket lines, where I can have no doubt people would then stand and applaud them for needing a fair pay rise, but they're not willing to vote for it here today to ensure that they get it. And that we are ensuring that we progress on strategic leisure. So it has already been said, Mayor, from realistic members at this side of the House, that this is what we need to do to ensure that we keep all those things, and 6.5% is the lowest rate that we can achieve those things. So I just wanted to put those points to the floor, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, now I have one more indicated speaker, and then we'll take you, Councillor Gallagher. After that, I'm going to just allow, if there's other members of parties who haven't spoken, to speak, but I think everybody has had time to say whatever they need to say. So Councillor Tierney, then Councillor Gallagher, and then if any other member from any other party wishes to speak, please indicate, and then I'm going to ask John to take it to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd only really indicated to speak to respond to a few things that Councillor Duffy had said, but there's a lot more been said since then, I suppose. And Councillor Duffy's right. I have been listening to the First Minister. I have been watching what she's been saying. I will continue to listen and I will continue to watch. But talk's cheap. You know, we need support now. It's grand saying, I'm going to tackle regional imbalance. It's all fluffy and nice in her speech and Stormont, and even on the BBC the other night. but ratepayers need support now. So when the First Minister brings support and tackles the regional imbalance that we face across this council district, I have no issue whatsoever in holding my hand up and saying congratulations, well done and thank you. But until she does it, I'm not going to stop talking about it, because she committed in Stormont to doing it. And that's what we will do. And I hope that it's not too long before I have to put my hand up and say, well done and thank you. Now, Councillor Boggs tried to give us a crash course in economics there. You can't buy things unless you have the money in the bank and all of that, and I fully appreciate it, fully understand what he's saying. But the reality is, and I've already explained this, we have a gap in the council finances of £4.6 million. Just bear that figure in mind, £4.6 million. If we were getting our fair share of the road support grant, it would be £6.25 million. That's where the money will be made up from. That's where we get the money. The money's in the bank, but it's in Stormount's bank, it's not in our bank. And we want it in our bank. And if we had it in our bank, then this council finances will be in a much better position. So it's not about jobs, it's not about services, it's not about people going on strike and all the spin that you're trying to put on it. It's not about that. It's about this council getting our fair share from Stormont that we need and deserve. And you can laugh all you want. It's not that funny, and I'll tell you who won't be laughing. The ratepayers whose bills that you're putting up this week, they won't be laughing, because it's not one bit funny. This council needs support from Stormont. The money's there. £3.3 billion has been committed. Our fair share is 6.25 million. The maths add up. The spin doesn't around the cutting services, the Riversdale and all of that nonsense that you're going on about. We are fully committed to supporting Citydale projects and everything else, and we are also fully committed to making sure that ratepayers across this district get the support that they need and deserve from central government, and we're not going to let them off the hook, no matter what amount of spin you or your colleagues wish they put on it. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, for about Councillor Gallagher, I just want to say to Councillor Tierney, I also listened to your party leader when he stood on the mantra he was going to stop Brexit, so we're still waiting for that. So, Councillor Gallagher.
Excuse me, Mayor, are you not supposed to be chairing this meeting as impartial and not making political points? Is that not the point of a chairperson? Because a mayor making political points like that there is not appropriate, in my opinion. And I would like a legal opinion on that, Mayor.
Come on, Brian, settle down. Well, I know we'll fight across the chamber, man. Don't be fighting the mayor.
Are you not willing to stand over what your party leader said about stopping bars and stopping Brexit? Because that didn't happen.
That's not the point that I made. I don't think it's appropriate for a mayor to be making political statements.
Councillor Tierney, I've indicated that Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting us in.
Thank you.
And I think I've been an unrealistic councillor since the day I came into this chamber, so I'll not be changing anytime soon with the indications of Councillor Boggs. But we have, and I have made numerous, I continue to make numerous suggestions on how we can reduce this. And if we don't stand up, and Sinn Féin's down there in our end, and they're selling Stormont, like nobody's business. But the fact is, it's Stormont that's letting us and this council and our ratepayers down. For example, cutting the grass. Stormont stopped cutting it, and we started paying. That's the reality for this council, and we can use that across numerous services that this council is picking up that Stormont should be paying for. And it comes in this book, it comes to over £10 million. That's the reality. And another suggestion, from this date last year to now, this council has sold off assets to the value of millions of pounds. Millions of pounds. We should be using that. That's where we should be using. And there's other revenue that has increased massively. Leisure has increased. This council from last year has far more access to do. And I'll not say where it is because it's confidential maybe in sense, but runs in the millions. And we should be using that, not just sticking our hand up of increasing the rates. And when Councillor Boggs walks around Strabane town and he sees all the shops that are closing. And they're closing. And the one thing they're citing, I can't afford the rates. I can't afford them. They're killing me. You tell them I voted for it. Good luck, Councillor Boggs.
Councillor or Alderman Kerrigan, but just to advise Councillor Gallagher too, we've already agreed at another meeting to use that money for capital projects, if you were listening. So Councillor Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for allowing me in, and do thank officers for the work that has taken place. Yes, we're not entirely content with every but an element of the rates process. There'll be other proposal which we would be minded of trying to bring in to reduce, but it wouldn't get passed in this chamber. So there is factors in it there, and we do take on board the difficulties, and we do take on board the comments made particularly by Councillor Tierney in regards to the rate support grant and the difficulties with it. We take on board as well the factors that the ministers at Stormont are only placed, and there has been some movement there, but there are major difficulties there. We are at 6.5% this year, 7.9% last year. So we don't want to put any burden onto our ratepayers. It's not something that any of us wish to do, but there is that difficulty, Mayor, that we do have to balance our books as well. So as I say, thank the officers for the work that's taken place. There would be other tweaks that we would have made, but as I say, they wouldn't have got passed, but it is that situation. So we will see how this vote goes, Mayor. Thank you.
Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor. Like others, sincere thanks to Alfie and everyone for what they have brought to us. But Alfie has referred to, I think it was 210 million community investment that will flow. My concern, and nobody will be surprised when I say that demographically, I would imagine that 1/3 of that should be flowing to the rural areas. That's on demographics. It's not. I agree with Councillor Boggs. We come in here not to raise rates or anything else, but what we do seek is an equity of service provision. Councillor Harkin rightly referred to the rate support grant, and others have. That business case, for example, referenced the City of Derry Airport, has been with the Department of Finance for some time, and it's the Department of Finance who will determine on the business case. I'm certain that officials have gone through that business case. I'm certain that it should be sitting on the table ready for the Finance Minister to look at. Why could that not have been one of the emergency or urgent issues to be dealt with? Reference the business case for the airport, reference rate support grant. Similarly, that has been sitting with department officials, and the minister should have been well aware, even through his colleagues throughout the country who are saying exactly the same thing as we are saying. The rate support grant is sadly below what it should be and has dropped immeasurably and needs a restoration. Perhaps maybe there's difficulty in going back to the original level, but definitely the rate support grant needs support to provide for those councils like ourselves who have that lower income base that has to be addressed. And internally, I am still irked that this council could spend 1.5 million to date on a project which was a short-term fix for the city baths. If anybody can tell me that that was not a political decision by some in the chamber, then I'd be very surprised. A short-term fix is what that exactly is. I said at the time, if a proposal was coming forward for a permanent resolution to that particular issue dead on, 1.5 million, that represents 2% within our rates, roughly. So, you know, within that, if that had been like, we could have been looking at something closer to actual inflation figure going forward. At this moment in time, I remain convinced to support this proposed 6.5. Thank you.
Councillor Raymond Barr, I did say that I was moving this on to a vote after allowed the parties that didn't speak to speak. Now, unless you have a query, Councillor Barr,
It's very, very brief. It's just a question for Councillor Boggs.
question, that's okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
No, just listen to what Councillor Boggs said. I have no doubt that repairs in Strabane, the rural areas, wouldn't have any problem with a nominal rates increase if they were getting value for money. But I'd just like to ask Councillor Boggs, can he sit there hand in heart as a Strabane councillor and tell the Strabane public that they're getting value for money?
Okay.
Mayor, could I make a quick comment, please? And it's just in relation to the business case around the airport. And I hope Alfie doesn't mind me stepping on his toes in relation to it, because I know that you're doing all the work in relation to it. The business case has sat with civil servants for quite some time. They have now asked for that to be updated. You're currently in the process of updating sensitivities around it, and it will then make its way on to the desk of the new minister. So I think that that just needs to be made clear. Thank you.
Councillor Boggs.
Can I make a brief point? I think it's
Well, you did reply to that.
have the opportunity to respond, Mayor. I think I omitted it from my first remarks, but other colleagues at this side of the chamber had mentioned it. We will continue to lobby for the rate support grant that everybody has so much interest in today. What I would say in relation to Councillor Barr's question to myself, and it seems that we've turned now from the focus from the First Minister to Councillor Boggs, is that this is my first year elected to this chamber. I think if we're asking questions about how much change in fair share Strabane is getting, we should maybe ask those councillors who have sat in this chamber from the Sperrin ward before this council term, Mayor. And unfortunately for those posing the question, that's not me.
Right, John, folks, can I call the order? I'm now going to ask John to take the vote. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor, members, thank you. Alderman Cook,
Abstain, John.
Alderman Guy,
Against.
Alderman Hussey,
Against.
Alderman Carrigan,
Abstain, John.
Alderman McMorris,
Abstain.
Alderman Middleton,
John.
Alderman Montgomery,
Against, John.
Alderman Wilkinson,
Abstain, John.
Councillor Jason Barr,
Against.
Councillor Lillian Barr,
Against.
Councillor Raymond Barr,
Against.
Councillor Boggs, Councillor Boyle,
Against.
Councillor Cusick,
Against.
Councillor Deany, Councillor Devine, Councillor Donnelly,
Against.
Councillor Alex Duffy, Councillor Sandra Duffy,
Ta.
Councillor Farrell,
Against.
Councillor Fleming,
Ta.
Councillor Gallagher,
Against.
Councillor Harkin,
Against.
Councillor Hart,
Ta.
Councillor Heaney,
Ta.
Councillor Hutton,
Ta.
Councillor Jackson,
Ta.
Councillor Leonard,
Ta.
Councillor Logue,
For.
Councillor McDade,
Against.
Councillor McGinley,
Ta.
Councillor McGowan,
For.
Councillor McHugh,
Or John.
Councillor Mooney,
Against.
Councillor Murphy,
Ta.
Councillor Norris,
Against.
Councillor O'Farrell, Councillor Riley,
Against.
Councillor Tierney,
Against.
and Councillor Enelis.
Ta.
Thank you, members. 1817.5. Mayor, I've recorded 18 for, 17 against, 5 abstentions, so the proposal passes.
Thank you. Thank you, John. We read out this, didn't we, John?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just going to ask John to read out the statement.
Thank you, Mayor. So members, just reading out the normal statement, which is a bit wordy. So if you wouldn't mind just bearing with me for a moment. As Chief Financial Officer, in line with Section 6, Local Government Finance Act 2011, I am required to report on the adequacy of Council's reserves for a financial year. With due regard to the robust rates process the Council has engaged in over the last number of months, the contingency funds earmarked for the continued economic volatility and financial risks, and Council's current general fund balance of 6.266 million, I confirm that this reserve will be adequate for the financing of Council services for 2024-2025 and is in line with the Department for Communities guidance of between 5% and 7.5% of the net operating expenditure. Further to this, and having considered the detailed report of the lead finance officer on the rates estimates for the year ending 31st of March 2025, I can confirm that the Council hereby 1. Approves the rates estimates for the year ending 31st of March 2025, totaling £78,043,844 and authorises the expenditure included in the said estimates. And 2. Under and by virtue of the powers contained in Section 3 of the Local Government Finance Act, Northern Ireland 2011, and Section 112 of the Local Government Act, Northern Ireland 2014, and by other acts and orders hereunto enabling, makes and fixes a district rate of 37.7408 pence in the pound for non-domestic properties and of 0.6070 pence in the pound for domestic properties on the rateable value of every hereditament in the district as the respective amounts required to be made by means of each rate in respect of the year ending 31st of March 2025. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members.
Thank you, folks. That's the meeting ended. Thank you.